Alright, we're back. Let's go ahead and look at part 2. Let's take a look at some examples here. The first one, you have this picture here. You've got two smaller triangles. You've got a lot of things labeled congruent. You've got these two sides in the triangle on the right, and then you also have these two sides in the triangle on the left. This is 20 degrees. Angle 1 measures 20 degrees. And let's see, it doesn't really give us directions, but what we'll do, we want to find all missing angles. Find all missing angles. So in your picture you have angle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They give us angle 1, so what we need to do is we need to figure out the other 4. This is kind of like a puzzle. You do one piece at a time. Start where you have numbers. Okay, I don't mean the angle numbers, I mean actual measurements, whether it's sides, whether it's angle measure. That's where you need to start. And then we'll fill in the pieces of the puzzle as we go. So let's start here with the 20. That's 20 degrees. Now we know this triangle, where we have the 20 degrees, it's isosceles, because those two sides are congruent. Well, what that tells you, and I can turn this, a lot of times students don't like it when the triangle's sideways, so if you want to think of it, look at it in the normal way. This side on the left and this side on the right, I'm going to draw arrows to their opposite angles. Now the side on the left, the angle that's opposite this is angle 2. Because if I think of the two endpoints of this segment on the left, the third endpoint has to be the opposite angle, and that's here. Okay? The side on the right contains these two endpoints, so it means the third endpoint, which is here, that's the opposite angle. Those have to be congruent. If the sides of a triangle are congruent, so are the opposite angles. Okay, now here's the thing. This is 20. And what I'll do here, I'm going to draw it like this. Okay, if that's easier to look at. So there's your 20 degrees, and there's your sides. These are the same. So if I call one of these x, so is the other one. That's also x. Now what we know is that if you add up the three angles of a triangle, you always get 180. So we can say x plus 20 equals 180. So you get 2x plus 20 equals 180. We'll go minus 20. So we get 2x equals 160. Divide by 2. And we get x is equal to 80. So in the picture here, we now know that these two angles are 80 degrees. Okay, normally I would label these inside, but just because there's so much labeling going on here, I'll just put the 80s and draw a little arrow to them. Okay, now, we also, let's move. We just solved the red triangle. Let's move over to the next one. Angle 3 is next to this blank angle here, which is 80. Okay, if I draw it separately, there's my angle 3, there's 80 degrees. Those two angles form a straight line. That's a linear pair. That means they're supplementary. They add up to 180. So if I take 180 and I subtract 80, then what that gives me is 100. So that's angle 3. So there's 100 degrees right there. Okay, on the side here, I'm going to say angle 2 equals, angle 3 equals, angle 4, and angle 5. And we just found angle 2 is 80 degrees. We just found angle 3 is 100. Now we need to figure out 4 and 5. Now, the triangle on the left, it doesn't look like it, but it's also isosceles. We've got these two marks. Those are congruent. Okay, let me turn it here. If those are congruent to each other, then what that means is that they're opposite angles. Now this side is opposite this angle here, and then this side is opposite this angle here. That has to add up to 180. Now again, I can say, okay, these two congruent angles are x and x. The other angle is 100, and they add up to 180. So on the side here, we can say that x plus x is 2x plus 100 equals 180. Subtract 100 from both sides, we get 2x equals 80. Divide by 2, x is 40 degrees. So angle 4 is 40 degrees. Now the last piece of this, at the bottom here, here's angle 5. Okay, let me draw this out again. There's angle 5. This angle here was 40, we just found that. And then the angle 2, that was 80. Now notice that when you put all three of those together, what you get at the bottom here is a straight line. All three of those give me a straight line. A straight line is 180. So if I add the 40 and the 80, that's 120. Subtract that from 180, and what I'm left with is 60. And that's my answer for number 5. 60 degrees. Okay, so you have to go through piece by piece. You're not going to get all of these at the same time, so take your time, look at one thing at a time. All right, let's take a look at example number 2. They tell us that two angles are congruent. Well, if the angles are congruent in a triangle, then their opposite sides are congruent. So I'm going to draw an arrow to this opposite side, and then from this angle goes to this side. What do I know about these two sides? They're the same. I'm going to mark those. Those are congruent. If they're congruent, then that means they're equal. The measures are equal. So 5x minus 8 equals 2x plus 7. There's my equation. 5x minus 8 equals 2x plus 7. Now I'm going to go minus 2x on both sides, and that will give me 3x minus 8 equals 7. We'll go plus 8 to get 3x equals 15. And then our last step is divide by 3, so we get x is equal to 5. Now does it work? Well, let's plug it back in. Let's put a 5 into the 2x plus 7. So 2 times 5 is 10, plus 7 is 17. 5 times 5 is 25, minus 8 is 17. They're the same, they should be the same, so my answer is good. And then number 3, whoops, the two angles are congruent. Let me draw an arrow to their opposite sides. That's 18, and that's 4x minus 6. Those are equal. They're congruent. So 4x minus 6 equals 18. We'll solve it. We'll go plus 6, and that gives us 4x equals 24. Divide by 4, x is 6. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well that's fine, I agree with that, but what's the 16 doing here? What am I supposed to do with that? The answer is, you do nothing. They put that in there just to kind of distract you and confuse you. You have to go by what they give you in the picture. Those are congruent, the angles, then it's their opposite sides. So in this case, the 16, you're not going to use it. You basically ignore it. But you have to know that. You have to know what you can and what you cannot do. Now, that's all the examples on this side. Flip it on the back. I'm going to give you one more example. Okay, so we'll call this example 4. Okay, you can ignore the other marks that ran through the paper here. Example 4, we're going to find x, and the picture is going to look like this. And we'll say that this is 20, this is 20, this is 82 degrees, and this is x degrees. And we want to find what x is. Okay, well, first thing you want to focus on, hey, we got some stuff congruent. We've got these two sides are congruent right here. That means that the opposite angles have to be congruent. Now if I turn this to make it look a little bit more traditional as isosceles, we've got x is opposite the 20, and then this blank is also opposite the other 20. Now these are not 20 degrees. The sides are 20, the angles are something else. But we know that the something else is congruent. Okay, let me turn this back around here. If this angle is x, well, so is this one. So what we got here, if we add these up, you have 2x plus 82 equals 180. Here we go, minus 82, and we get 98. Divide by 2, and your answer is 49. And one thing that you'll notice, a lot of this stuff you can do without setting up the equation, because you understand all these add up to 180, all the interior angles, subtract 82, and then divide by 2. So, you know, you can do this in your head or you can do it on a calculator. And that is the end of the notes.